I'm Sally Sanders with the Tallahassee Vegetarian Community, and I have a couple of announcements before Jay takes the floor to introduce our speaker. I wanted to let you know that we have another special guest speaker coming to Tallahassee Monday the 26th, just 4 days from now. And Din Shaw, whose parents were the founder of the American Vegan Society, is traveling on her national book tour, and she's arriving in Tallahassee tonight. Later tonight, and she'll be here at the Unitarian Universalist Church in this same room to do her presentation on Monday night, same time. So we want to invite everyone to please come back for that event. We want to thank the Unitarian Universalist Church, the Social Justice Committee for hosting both of these events. It's a perfect facility for this, and we are so grateful to the church for allowing us to use their facility. And I have one other quick announcement. We wanted to share with you an exciting documentary. Some of you may have had the chance to see Cowspiracy when it was in Tallahassee in August. We were the first city in the state to show this environmental documentary, and it was very well received. And we are excited to say that we have a second showing scheduled, and this one will be free. And it will be at the FSU ASCU Student, what's that called? Student Life Center? Student Union, I don't know, whatever.
Student Life Center, yeah.
And March 2nd, did I get the date right, Julie?
Yes.
March 2nd. That's a Monday evening?
Monday night, March 2nd.
Okay, and Monday, March 2nd, we would love to have everybody come to that event. It is free. It's a very powerful documentary called Cowspiracy. So we really encourage you to come to that. And I think we have some brochures in the back for our TalVeg group. TalVeg is our Tallahassee Vegetarian Community. So if you'd like to learn more about our group and what we do and the fun events we have, please let me know, let Julie know, or any of our other members, or pick up one of the brochures. So we're excited that you're here, and I'll turn it over to Jay.
Great. So, my name is Jay Quigley. I'm connected to a lot of things, including Ethical Food Association at FSU. I'm really happy to see all these wonderful faces out here, and I was just really curious how you guys found out about this. So, if you found out on Facebook, would you raise your hand for me? Okay. And what about Tallahassee Democrat? Okay. Meetup.com? Okay, so where else?
Flyer.
There's
a flyer.
Newsletter, the church bulletin?
How many found out from UUC2 here? Okay, great. And then you saw a flyer where?
Sweet Pea Cafe. Same here.
Excellent. Cool. That's great to hear. So quite a variety of advertising there. So yeah, I'll be happy to introduce Dr. Tuttle in just a second. We're going to have him speak until roughly 8:20. Very excited to hear everything he has to say. We're going to then go into a Q&A for 10-20 minutes, something like that. And then at the very end there will be a book signing if you would like to purchase the World Peace Diet, or talk more to Dr. Tuttle. Or surely he'll sign for you as well. So with that said, I would like to introduce Dr. Will Tuttle. He's an author, he's an educator, a pianist, and a composer. He has lectured and performed widely throughout North America and Europe. He's the author of the acclaimed #1 Amazon bestseller, The World Peace Diet. And he's a recipient of Peace Abbey's Courage of Conscience Award. He's also the creator of several wellness training programs. His PhD is from the University of California, Berkeley, and he focused there on educating intuition and altruism in adults. He has taught college courses in creativity, humanities, mythology, religion, and philosophy. He's a former Zen monk and a Dharma master in the Korean Zen tradition, as well as a 30-year vegan. He's devoted to cultural healing and awakening, and he has created 7 CD albums of original piano music. He's traveling full-time with his spouse Madeline, a Swiss visionary artist. In their solar-powered rolling home, he presents over 150 lectures, retreats, workshops, and concerts annually. And tonight he's going to talk to us about how we can both be healthy and save the planet. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Tuttle.
Thank you, Jay.
You're welcome.
Appreciate your stellar introduction there. And thank you. Let's give a big hand to everyone who helped make this possible. Julie and the Tallahassee. Unitarians, thank you, thank you, thank you. We love the Unitarians. They're on the forefront of making trouble. So, how many of you have actually read the World Peace Diet? Just so I have a feeling how many of you have read the book, just so I know. So nobody, one. Okay,
I
Julie.
started reading it.
Good, yes. All right, well, that's fantastic because you don't know then what you're in for. Okay, good. Yeah, actually, the World Peace Diet's really been doing very well lately. It's, as Jay mentioned, it was a number one Amazon bestseller a few years ago. It's now really going international. It's up to, I think, 15 languages now worldwide. We just got back from a tour in, actually early, about 10 months ago maybe, in Australia, New Zealand, and China, and Taiwan, and it's great to see. It was actually a number one bestseller in Taiwan, and I gave a lecture there in Taipei, and over 2,000 people showed up to hear about veganism. So I think we set a world record for some people coming to a vegan lecture. had to be there. I don't think it would. Well, maybe it'll happen here sometime too. But the basic, I'm going to dive right in because we don't have really that much time to share all these ideas. The World Peace Diet has also an audiobook, and it's me reading the entire book rather quickly to get through as quickly as possible. And it's 13 and a half hours long, and so you'll probably hear me talking faster and faster and faster because we only have about an hour, maybe 10 or 15 minutes. But I'd like to hit on some of the main ideas so you get a sense of this, because from my point of view, this is the most important discussion that human beings in our society can have today. And parts of it sound somewhat negative in the sense that I'll be talking about some of the, I'll be talking really about the ramifications of our food choices, and they are very negative. More negative, I think, than we really imagine. But the underlying message is enormously positive. So I wanted to say that at the very beginning, that even though we are born into a society that is consuming a lot of animal-based foods and is therefore suffering and causing enormous suffering to ourselves and other beings, we can change that. And there's nothing stopping us, really, except for our own inertia. But essentially, we can change that in ourselves, and we can change that in our society, and there's no more important change that we can imagine than moving to a vegan world, a vegan culture, or a culture of justice and kindness and respect for non-human animals, and really for each other is what will come out of that. So the basic idea is probably two main ideas. One is that we are born into a society that has a taboo. The greatest taboo in our culture is the taboo against knowing who you eat, basically. And so if you found your way through the door here somehow, I want to applaud you, because I know that if you're here, then in many ways you're in the vanguard of a social movement of transformation, a very benevolent transformation. You're the pioneers that will help bring in a world of greater freedom and justice and kindness and sustainability. So the reason I think it's such a taboo is that at a very deep level, being born in our society and being forced to participate in the culture's meals, which contain a lot of, obviously, flesh of animals, dairy products and eggs, secretions of animals, we have all been forced to suppress, from the time we're little infants, our natural wisdom, compassion, and intelligence. And so to allow our wisdom and compassion and intelligence to return to us as individuals and as a society, we have to stop suppressing what we're doing. We have to, remember in The Wizard of Oz, how they thought, they had this whole view of The Wizard of Oz, and then suddenly Toto pulled the curtain back and was like, oh, now I can figure this thing out. So what I'm here to do, essentially, what the World Peace Diet does, really, I think, essentially, is pull the curtain back on every level to see our society. So that's one aspect. The other aspect is how important it is to pull the curtain back on our routine mistreatment of animals for food. How many of you consider that you're already doing that? In other words, you're already making an effort to pull back the curtain and understand what's really going on in our culture's food system. Just trying to see. Wow, good. Most of you, how many of you don't want to do that because it's kind of scary? Yeah, it is scary. Some of you, I don't think ever raise your hands, that's okay. So basically, the greatest adventure that a human being today in our society can go on, an adventure of self-discovery, is the adventure of making an effort to understand the ramifications of our food choices. And the reason for that is that if we want to live a life of meaning and purpose and authenticity, we have to understand ourselves, right? We have to understand ourselves somewhat. If we don't understand ourselves, then we're strangers to ourselves. We're kind of robotic. We're just robotically doing what we've been told. We're fulfilling a cultural program. We have these images that we're blasted with by the media, by religion and government and education, and we're just buying things that we think we're supposed to be happy. But to actually, in the ancient Greek temple at Delphi, there was a saying, Gnathe Suton, that means know thyself. That's really the foundation of all spiritual, psychological, intellectual, emotional maturity, is to understand ourselves. But to understand ourselves, you have to understand our culture, because we are products of our culture. And what anthropologists understand is that if you want to understand any culture, you look at their food. Food is the most powerful connection that we have as individuals with our society and with nature and with the cosmos and with everything. And so what anthropologists understand, I think we all know this in our bones, is that the most powerful way that any society transmits its values from generation to generation is through rituals. And by far the biggest, most powerful, pervasive ritual in any society are the meals, when you sit down and eat food together. So we're essentially taught not to look at our meals. We don't want to look there. We don't want to look deeply into our meals, these mealtime rituals, because if we do, we get very uncomfortable. Because what the heck are we eating, actually? Most people don't want to look at that. And I understand that. It's not, it's ridiculous. But anyway, but if we do look at that, and we begin to get an understanding of what the meals actually are, then we begin to understand our society and why we have the problems we have, why we have injustice, racism, sexism, heterosexism, classism, environmental devastation, hunger, war, terrorism, violence, everything. I mean, it becomes very obvious. It's on our plate. It's in the meals. It's in the food. It's in the... Okay, so what I'll do is I'll talk about this on two levels. It's in the external ramifications of our food choices, and I'll talk about that briefly, because again, I could talk for hours on all these different things, but the external ramifications, basically the environmental, the cultural, and our physical health. Those three are the main external dimensions of our food choices, the ramifications of our food choices. And then but what's really interesting, what the World Peace Diet is really the only book that goes into this, actually, is the internal ramifications of our food choice. In other words, not only what does eating a lot of animal foods do to the outer world that we're in, but what does it do to the inner landscape of our consciousness? What does it do to us to be doing this, to be forced into this by our society from the time we're infants? What does it do to our spiritual, psychological, emotional, intellectual capacities? What kind of attitudes does it force on us? And what we'll discover is that all of it is profoundly not in our best interest. Not at all. And it's not ever been of our choice. So I'm just so glad you're here, because this is it. So the basic underlying fact that is non-negotiable, and this is a very conservative estimate, is that we live in a society, the United States of America, this particular country, where every single day, every day, and this never changes, we kill 75 million animals for food. So this is what we're doing every day. There's no big headline in the New York Times like, "What happened? We killed 75 million animals for food yesterday," or for something. What kind of tragedy? It's business as usual. So this is a vast industrialized killing machine of epic proportions. It's enormous, and it was here before we were born. So we have a tendency when we hear that we go, "Oh, it's my fault." It's not your fault, in the sense that this was already going on for centuries. This way of living, of imprisoning animals, mutilating them in a whole range of ways, confining them, hyper-confining them, hanging up by one leg, slitting their throats and eating them. So this is what we've been doing for a long time, but it's become huge. It's become bigger than ever, and the good news about the whole thing, in that, is that this is something that is only happening. This killing of 75 million animals every single day. It's only happening because we, the people, every day. Us. It's not some kind of government. This is not some kind of war in another country that we can't stop or something. This is happening because we vote. We vote. We take out our dollars and we say, kill an animal, confine an animal, castrate, rapes, all that animals, so we can eat them and eat their flesh and steal their babies and do all that. So this is something that we the people are voting for. So we can understand this, we can stop it, we can do something else, and we can see, we have, the beauty of this is that the talk I'm giving tonight is not merely a critique of a corrupt, obsolete, cruel, violent, wasteful, vicious system. It is showing, inherent in it is that we have fantastic, wonderful alternatives that we are also promoting, which we call veganism, right? We call whatever, something. Vegan seems to be the best word at this point. But a plant-based diet for ethical reasons, or a plant-based way of living, or non-violent way of living, that is radically inclusive. That's based on love and kindness and caring and generosity and giving and mercy and gentleness and all these things. That we can live a life based on those qualities. There's nothing stopping us, except for the fact that we've been programmed. So when we leave here today and we go out and we see people going to McDonald's or Burger King or going to a restaurant or steakhouse or going to the grocery store, going to Whole Foods or wherever it is and buying flesh of animals, we have to realize that there's only one reason anyone does that. The one reason is people do that is they are following orders. That's the only reason. They're just doing what they've been told. It's kind of like we're in these blinders have been slapped on us from the time we were born by every institution in our society, by our family, by our educational institutions and religious institutions and governmental institutions, corporate institutions, financial institutions, and media institutions, and this entire culture is in complete agreement unanimously that these certain animals are put here by God for us to eat, and we better eat them. And so we are not just as little infants watching adults eating flesh and excretions of animals. We are actually forced to participate in those rituals ourselves. They feed it to us. You go to any grocery store and you just look at the cute little jars of baby food and you'll see veal. I like that one, feeding babies to babies, and chicken and turkey and beef and cheese and all that stuff. So this is what we are forced into as little kids, and so we're just following orders. Even as we grow up, the pressure continues from the medical establishment and mostly from other people. Right? We sort of lock each other in because we're born into a society where people do this. There's, I think, a very important saying that kind of highlights the whole thing by Krishnamurti. He said, "It is not a good idea to be well-adjusted to a profoundly sick society." This is a well-known saying, but it's very important because, it's not a good idea to be well-adjusted to a profoundly sick society. And yet, at the very deep part of our psychological being, we want to be well-adjusted to whatever culture we're born into. Right? We want to be well-liked. We want to be approved of. We want to go to the church barbecue and eat what everybody's eating. We want to go to the company fish fry and eat what everybody's eating. We want the boss, to like us, so he'll give us a raise. And he's eating fish, so we want to eat fish. We say, "I'm a vegan." He goes, "Well, you're not getting a raise then, So, "Oh, I'll eat some fish then if I get a raise." So, so we're really pressured, in many ways to go along with our society. So that's why most people are afraid to hear this message. It's just fear. That's all it is. But you are obviously people who are willing to face your fears and stay in your chairs while I talk about all these things, which I'm very delighted to see. And the beauty is that we can transform our society. So what I'd like to do is talk a little bit now about the external effects. Okay, so basically I said, one of the external effects is the environmental effects of animal agriculture. What we have to understand, essentially, and I wish I had more time to go into this because this is fascinating. All of it is enormously fascinating, but it is all in the book. And you can, if you read the Wilkie's Diet, it is laid out there. But the basic idea is, environmentally, for example, the problem with animal agriculture is that it's enormously inefficient. It's epically inefficient. You can't even imagine how something could be so inefficient, but that's what it is. And so this killing machine that I mentioned at the beginning, that's killing all these animals, has tentacles that reach everywhere on planet Earth, right? I mean, they reach the bottom of every ocean, and everywhere in between, in the heart of every rainforest, in every place on land, into every city, town, village, into every home, and into our bodies, into our minds, into everything. It just reaches everywhere, and everything it touches, it damages. It's extremely violent and devastating on every level. Madeline and I lived up until recently for 17 years full-time in an RV, as you say, with solar panels on top. And so we've traveled, we know, we've seen everything. We've seen a lot here. And so basically most of North America has been basically transformed into vast monocropped fields of genetically engineered corn, soy, and alfalfa and other feed grains, not to feed to people, but to feed to animals. Most people don't realize that. They think, oh, look at all this food. It's not for people directly. It's for animals, and the pigs and cows and chickens and turkeys and ducks and geese and sheep and lambs or whatever, they're all basically stuck away in these stinking sheds by the thousands or tens of thousands, or in feedlots like we saw recently when we came across the desert and everything. And it's hideous for them. I mean, but they have to eat a lot, and it's enormously wasteful. So in many ways, it's almost like if you took our brilliant scientists and said, listen, folks, try to create a system that maximizes suffering for animals, maximizes devastation of wildlife, maximizes environmental pollution and global warming and water depletion and soil erosion, and maximizes disease. I mean, you couldn't come up with a better system than to do what we're doing. You couldn't. I mean, it's a masterful system if you want to just devastate everything and shut people down emotionally and psychologically and spiritually and just crush and basically channel huge amounts of money to a tiny wealthy elite. That's what it really does very well. It works money and power to a tiny few. It works very well for that. But for everything else, it also works very well. If you want to destroy everything, it works very well. So, environmentally, briefly, animals take all of this plant matter, which essentially is the healthiest foundation of food. I mean, I've been a vegan now actually 35 years, and what plants provide us everything we need. We do not need anything from it. Animals do not contribute one thing to what our nutritional requirements. So, but these animals basically transform the lipids, the essential fatty acids, all the amino acids and the proteins and the carbohydrates and the fiber and the vitamins and the minerals and everything else in the grains and legumes and so forth that they're eating into four things: saturated fat, cholesterol, acidifying animal protein, and huge amounts of sewage, methane, nitrous oxide, that are destabilizing the climate more than anything we're doing, massive amounts of pollution running off into rivers and lakes and streams, into groundwater, down the Mississippi, into the Gulf of Mexico. We have the largest dead zone on the entire planet. There's over 25 major dead zones now on planet Earth, all caused by animal agriculture. And the biggest one in the world is right here, right in the Gulf of Mexico, where nothing can live because of all the chemicals, herbicides, pesticides, chemical fertilizers, and all the hormones, everything that's washed off from animal agriculture. It's unbelievably, it's by far the worst thing we're doing to the earth. There's nothing that comes close to animal agriculture for environmental devastation, soil erosion, water depletion, water pollution, global climate change, species extinction, devastation of the oceans, devastation of the rainforest. We're cutting down an acre per second of Amazonian rainforest right now. The latest studies just came in. An acre per second of Amazonian rainforest for one reason: to cut down trees to grow soybeans to feed to factory farm pigs, cows, and chickens and fishes, so we can eat meat, dairy products, and eggs. We're voting for that, and that's what we're doing. So when we cut down an acre of rainforest, we're not just cutting down some trees. We're destroying ecosystems that took millions of years to evolve, that are irreplaceable, and we're losing, according to biologists, we don't know exactly how many, but they're estimating between 50 and 150 species are going extinct every single day because of this. Because of this and the devastation we're doing to oceans. We've been overfishing the oceans now for decades, and every year since the late 80s, for example, the fishing capacity on planet Earth has increased. We have bigger ships that can get all the fish. I mean, the fish don't have a chance, believe me. They have these huge nets that bring up everything. But every year since the late 80s, the pounds of fish that we catch has gone down every year because the fish are gone. So 2/3 of the fish we're eating now are factory farm. They're grown in these stinking lagoons or in these offshore pens where they dump all these toxins and hormones and antibiotics to try to keep these fish alive. I've seen them. Fish swimming in literally black water in their own feces, and then pulled out and fed to people or fed to animals. And so this system is just absolutely devastating to ecosystems. The pollution by everything, by chemicals, by drugs, by all the other inputs that are used in animal agriculture, the herbicides, fungicides, and pesticides. And also the irony is, of course, as well, is that these animals concentrate all of the pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, as well as heavy metals, PCBs, dioxins, as well as nuclear radiation. All that stuff concentrates, especially in fish, especially in dairy products, especially in eggs. And so when we eat these things, we get huge concentrations of toxins that are coming from the environment that we are putting into the environment. Fish concentrate toxins in their flesh, literally hundreds of thousands, millions of times more in their flesh than is in the water. So, and then the reason that the demand for fish is so enormous, because you think, how can we eat so many fish until there aren't any fish left in the oceans? But oceanographers are saying now that the collapse of the global fish populations at this point is imminent. I mean, it's already underway. And the reason is that the demand is so big for fish is because we're not just eating them ourselves. Scientists discovered actually decades ago that if you enrich the feed of pigs and cows and chickens with fish meal, that it's profitable. You get more, the cows will give more milk and they'll get fat, and it's cheaper and it's worth it. So today, for example, in the United States, cows are eating more fish than human beings are. So when you're eating cheese or drinking milk or whatever, soy, some kind of yogurt, you're actually eating fish meal. They're not just feeding cows grass like they've been eating for millions of years. They push the cows. They push them to produce because they want to exploit them, and they don't care about abusing them. And so they feed them grain. It's soy and corn. They're not designed for that. That's hard on them. That causes E. coli, which of course poisons us, makes them all completely sick all the time, but they don't care because they kill them. On any dairy, organic or not, cows, even though they would normally live 25 years, when they reach 4 or 5 years old, maximum 6 years old, they're hung upside down by one leg, they're sent off and they're killed. So they're worn out by the system. So we have this whole system in place that's pushing these cows to produce by feeding them grain, but they didn't stop with grain. They go to meat. So cows are eating huge amounts of meat. Are cows designed to eat meat, do you think? I mean, they're eating fish meal, they're eating, they grind up everything. I mean, all the slaughterhouse stuff that they don't feed to human beings or to pets, they feed back to cows and chickens and pigs who are not designed to eat meat. So their animals are eating each other. That's causing mass cows eating a lot of other cows. They've been doing that for decades. Insane practice, and they feed them everything. Now they feed them feces. They eat a lot of chicken litter, all that kind of stuff, as well as dogs and cats that are euthanized, and all the drugs in these dogs and cats, the euthanization. All that stuff goes there. You're eating cheese. You're eating all that stuff. It's all in there. It's standard procedures and going on. This is not only enormously devastating to our ecosystems, but it's also to our bodies. If we're going to be, because all these toxins concentrate in the flesh and secretions of animals. So what we have is a system that's completely gone awry, where we're devastating the ecosystems by animal agriculture, and it's by far the biggest thing we're doing. If someone came from outer space and spend maybe a few weeks looking around, doing some reconnaissance at what's happening on planet Earth, what are they doing down there on that planet, and then radio back up, okay, what are they doing down there, and they radio back to the mothership. They'd say something like, well, what they're doing is they're just enslaving and killing and eating a lot of animals. We don't think of ourselves as doing that. We think, oh no, I'm a computer programmer, I'm a lawyer, I'm a doctor, I'm a professor, or whatever. No, you're basically killing and eating a lot of animals. That's basically by far the biggest project of human beings on this planet. There's nothing that comes close to that. Our entire society is organized around that. Completely. We are a herding culture. We don't think of ourselves as being a herding culture. We're not walking around with a crook, trying to pull a sheep back from going over the edge of the cliff or whatever. But basically, the sheep and these animals are now just, it's industrialized, and it's and we're like the wealthy ones in the old days. There's a few people that have to do the shepherding work. They're just in there tending to the animals in the factory farms, and we're sort of the rich ones that can just buy their flesh. But it's essentially a herding culture. So once we understand that if we want to just bless our world, if we want to do something to help our world, if we want to reduce our environmental footprint, there's no greater way to reduce our environmental footprint than to move to a plant-based diet. There's nothing comes close. According to the United Nations, for example, they're very conservative about this stuff, so this is very conservative. It's 32 to 1. In other words, 32 people eating a plant-based diet use as much water as one person eating the standard Western diet. And we're not talking about like 2 to 1 or 3 to 1. Even 2 to 1 or 3 to 1 would be like, whoa, I can cut the amount of water. Water's becoming, especially in the out west, it's becoming really scarce. I mean, we're sucking aquifers that took millions of years to charge dry all over the country. It's happening here in Florida, too. Animal agriculture. Cows are destroying the aquifers here. And these are not going to fill up again. I mean, what are we doing? It's crazy. So we're not talking about 2 to 1 or 3 to 1. We're talking about 30 to 1. 30 to 1. And with the other inputs, like petroleum and land and pollution and water pollution, it's around 15 or 20 to 1. You know, huge. So just by moving to a plant-based diet, we can just make a huge reduction in the amount of devastation that's emanating from my life. You know, it's the average person, American, walking around, taking out their wallet and voting for meat and dairy and eggs. They're like an exploding, blasting, destructive force. You know, they don't see it. Our whole system is set up so no one sees anything. You're encouraged to do it. You know, you go to the restaurant and they say, I'm going to have a prime rib. And the wait person says, wow, you're a very smart guy. You know, we have the best prime rib. You're a very, very discerning gourmet. You know, they said, you idiot, you know, what are you doing ordering prime rib? You're going to kill an animal, you're going to take all this water, you're going to destroy everything, you know. Stop it. What are you? You're a sociopath, you know. They are. It is sociopathic to order meat and dairy. It's totally sociopathic. It's psychopathic. But, you know, it's standard procedure. It's what we're all taught to do. So anyone who's doing it, it's this normal behavior. It's this programmed robotic behavior. It's this robotic behavior. That's all it is. I mean, that's all it is. But the idea is we're not supposed to ever question this. But if we want to reduce our environmental footprint, this is the thing to do. And the other thing I think it's important to understand, maybe 2 other things. One is that there's a movement lately to free range and grass fed, that, you know, like at Whole Foods and other places. I think it's very important to realize not only is this still causing enormous pain and suffering to these animals, also environmentally and in terms of our eco-footprint, it doesn't help very much at all. In fact, there's a lot of studies that show that free range, for example, free range meat creates a lot more methane, a lot more nitrous oxide, a lot more climate destabilizing gases than factory farmed or feedlot beef. But also the other thing that most people don't think of, which I think is, to me, is just a big thing. I just can't not say something. We have a war against wildlife. And the reason that wildlife, that animals, I love animals. You know, Madeline and I, we travel around North America and we go other places, you know, all over the whole world. And actually, Madeline's painting, I should mention, Madeline has these paintings up here. And how many do you have, Madeline? Like 2 dozen, I think, right?
24.
Yeah, about 24 paintings in the back. But Madeline's a longtime vegan also for many decades. And she paints animals to show their beauty. And she before I met her, she had gone all over the world, you know, on safaris and things and seeing every kind of animal imaginable. And in their natural environment. All the animals, I mean, there's hardly any animal, any mammal left on this planet that's not really in danger by human activity. And it's because we're taking away their habitat, we're destroying their habitat, we're cutting down the forest, we're cutting down what's happening in Africa now with Kentucky Fried Chickens moving to Africa. They're just cutting, they want to cut down all the forests, they want to grow all this grain, they feed all these chickens, and people want to eat more meat, and all, you know, the American meat machines going over there, and now elephants and elephants and giraffes and you know, all these animals are really getting wiped out because their habitat's getting destroyed. And also because now they're in conflict with, they say, with the farmers. It's ranchers. And farmers who are growing grain for the ranchers. And they're not really ranchers, they're feedlot operators or they're animal agriculture operators. So in this country, it's the same thing. You know, we have a Department of Wildlife Services that you can go on their website and just see the millions of animals that they're killing every year with our taxpayer money. And so when the animals up until, you know, maybe 10 years ago, it was virtually 100% factory farm. Nobody gets into a factory farm. I mean, if I go in, they'll just throw me in jail. If a coyote's never going to get in, you know, coyotes can't get in. But now, instead of being 100% factory farm, now it's 99% factory farm, right? Or maybe 98, so we have 1 or 2%, but everybody's saying, well, I don't eat factory farm, but I eat this, you know, something. And that's the worst thing for wildlife, because now you have some animals, like some cows, some pigs, some chickens, that are not in the actual shed with a door locked in this stinking, dark, horrible, polluted disaster area. They're out in some kind of enclosure inside an electrical fence, perhaps. And anyway, so what that's done is the whole war against wildlife has just taken off. You know, They don't want any, I mean, coyotes, bobcats, mountain lions, badgers, skunks, raccoons, opossums, beavers, foxes, prairie dogs, trumpeter swans, ravens, black starling, I mean any animal at all you can ever think of. You look on their list of animals that they're killing by the hundreds or thousands or millions, those animals are on there. They're killing them from the air, from the land, poisoning. Because any rancher or farmer who calls up and says, well, you know, I got this problem, I got some beavers here, or I got some raccoons, and they'll come out and kill them. So this is the situation. Animal agriculture has always been a war against nature. It's always been a war against wildlife. It's always been a war, actually a war against people. I actually go into that in the World Peace Diet. It's the very first word for war on this planet, actually the ancient Sanskrit word gavya, it means the desire for more cows. First word for war. And it's the root of slavery. When you own animals, it's a small step to owning people. The violence in our society, it all comes from one activity, it's animal agriculture. So the point to understand here, essentially, is that animal agriculture is by far the worst thing we're doing to the outer world, to the environment, also to our society. If we want to be healthy and happy people, we have to live in a somewhat healthy earth, right? Ecosystems. Okay, it's not possible in animal agriculture. The beauty of this also, I should just say, is that as we move to a plant-based diet, and I would say, don't just move to a plant-based diet, I would say at the same time, make it organic. Because if it's not organic, then what are we doing? We're buying foods with pesticides, herbicides, and fungicides, and killing birds and beasts, birds and fishes, and butterflies and bees, and so on. So organic is very important. Madeline is Miss Organic, and she's got some great YouTube videos of cooking and making all your food organically, if you want to check that out. And I would say don't just stop with plant-based and organic, but go one step more and have the food that you're eating be as much as possible whole foods. In other words, foods that don't have pesticides, preservatives, I should say, preservatives, artificial flavors, artificial colorings, and all these kinds of things. As much as possible, vegetables and grains and legumes and fruits and so forth, nuts and seeds. And make things, and if you do that, really, if you eat an organic, plant-based, whole foods diet, way of living, that is a wonderful foundation for vitality, for health, for energy, for yourself, and for the earth. And as we move that way, we can feed everyone. I mean, easily feed everyone on a tiny fraction of the land that we're using now. Because if this doesn't take that much land to grow food for people, we can allow the rivers to come back, the oceans to come back, the forests to come back, everything to come back, the wildlife to come back. We could stop this war against the earth. The war against the earth and the ecosystems is founded on two things. It's founded on the actual act of animal agriculture, which is devastating on every level. The actual cutting down of forests, destruction of oceans, that is the outer, but it's also caused by the mentality of animal agriculture, which is a mentality of domination, of commodification of life, of exploitation of other living beings. That mentality is the real problem. That's the real problem. Animal agriculture injects into us a mentality where peace is absolutely impossible, where harmony is impossible, where justice is impossible, where health is impossible. It's utterly impossible. How can you be a slave owner of millions of animals, stabbing and raping and killing them, and talk for a moment about wanting a world of peace, or justice, or freedom? I mean, what a joke. It's not even, it's so ridiculous. And yet, people do that with a straight face in our society. They say, yeah, we want a world of justice for our cause. And we're going to go have a hamburger now and think about it, talk about it. Oh, I mean, anyway, so it's not our fault. We can't see it. We're just so brainwashed, so indoctrinated, so hypnotized by the massive programming. It's injected by every institution from the time, by our own mothers, and our own fathers, and our own teachers and ministers, and everybody. So, anyway, so the environmental devastation is number one. The cultural devastation, just briefly, the fact is that if we want to live in a healthy society, we have to have some little bit of equality, some little bit of justice in our relationships with each other. Animal agriculture devastates that. You don't have it. First of all, it's so wasteful. We know, no one argues this, every single year we grow enough food to feed 12 to 15 billion people. Every year. There's no big New York Times headline saying, oh, no, we just did it again, grew enough food to feed 12 to 15 billion people. People would say, well, we only have 7.2 billion. Well, like, what's going on? Why do we have 1 to 2 billion people starving to death? We say, oh, we have too many people, they're all starving, can't feed them, sorry, just too many. The problem is that most of the food we're growing, we're not feeding to people, we're feeding to these animals who we never see. They're stuck away, in, like I said, in these stinking sheds, and then we eat their flesh and secretions. And so the system is basically this. People who live in industrialized nations of the world have high-powered economies. It is not difficult for us in a high-powered economy to drive up the price of grain on the world market and to feed it to our imprisoned pigs, cows, chickens, and factory farm fishes, and eat the flesh and secretions of these animals in a huge amount. But people who live, and there's a lot of people, most of the people in the world live in less industrialized nations. They don't have high-powered economies. We drive up the price of grain on the world market. They can't pay that much. They're not making the kind of money we're making per hour. They can't pay for it. And they're also being forced off the land by policies of the IMF and the World Bank and the large corporations and financial institutions and governments like the United States. And so they're starving. And so how can we possibly have peace in the world when mothers are seeing their babies dying in their arms, and the terrible suffering of that, and the anxiety of that, and the just the heartbreak of that. And then right over here, not far away, are people that are eating everything. You know, we just take all that land, all that grain, all that petroleum, all that water, create all this pollution, and we eat our meat and dairy and our eggs. And we just think we're entitled to it because we live in the country, we can do that. So you're going to have war. It's absolutely impossible not to have war when you have that kind of injustice. And of course we have a large Defense Department, so-called Defense Department, and large war machine that makes going to make a lot of money on that. And so this kind of conflict. And the irony again is that while these people in the less industrialized nations are suffering and dying from malnutrition and hunger, people in the more industrialized nations are also suffering from epidemics of obesity and diabetes, osteoporosis and liver disease and kidney disease and heart disease and strokes and breast and prostate and colon cancer and dementia and Parkinson's, and all these diseases that have been definitively linked to eating diets that are rich in animal-based foods. And so we have a pharmaceutical industry that's just gorging on money and power and controlling everything because of all these sick people that need all these drugs. Not only physical illnesses, but for mental illness, because we have, the pharmaceutical industry's largest profits. They have three. I don't know if you knew this, but the pharmaceutical industry has three basic areas where they make huge profits. One area of profits is there's over 10,000 different hormones and drugs and antibiotics now, like 85, is the last I heard, it's just going up every year. It's up to 85% of all the antibiotics used are given to cows and pigs and chickens. But anyway, so all these drugs, and over 10,000 are given to these poor animals. And this is, vaccination without any permission. I mean, these animals don't have a choice. They're just given all kinds of drugs against their will to try to keep them alive long enough so they can be hung upside down and killed. So huge amounts of drugs and chemicals and things are given to animals and forced on them. And so that's a huge profit section for the pharmaceutical industry. Then the second thing is people then go ahead and they actually eat the flesh of these drugged, tortured animals. And they get the diseases that come from that, right? We get all these diseases I just mentioned. So that's the second huge profit center for the pharmaceutical industry. Is they need, they sell all these medications for cancer and diabetes and everything else, strokes and blood pressure and everything else. So that's number two. But the third one is the largest of all, the biggest profit sector. And does anyone know what that is? Their biggest one of the three?
Mental.
Right. The biggest one is, so this is the biggest one. All the drugs they have for people with psychological illness. And so what are people eating in our society? We're eating animals who are driven into insanity. These animals are driven into insanity. I mean, they're stuck in these cages where can you imagine? You can't move. You can't move like your entire life. They're banging their heads against the bars, totally crazy, pecking each other's eyes out, biting each other's tails, in their own manure, in a stench that they can't even begin to stand. And so they're driven into insanity. So we're eating insane animals, and we have the pharmaceutical industry just cleaning up, making huge profits from people who need drugs for chronic pain and anxiety and panic and depression and can't sleep at night and blah, blah, Of course not. I mean, what are we thinking? As we sow, so shall we reap. This is, this is the fundamental truth. And the other aspect of this we have to understand, if we want to live how can we live in a healthy society when this is happening? And the other thing is that animal agriculture is essentially trauma. Everything animal agriculture touches, it traumatizes. It traumatizes oceans, rivers, ecosystems, animals, wildlife, people, and the most of all, probably, are the workers. And Madeline and I, again, as we've been traveling around, we took some time to go to stockyards, factory farms, slaughterhouses. You want to see people do the work, the most hideous. I mean, I just shudder to think of the whole army of workers that we employ. You know, you walk into a grocery store or restaurant, you buy prime rib, or you buy a burger, or you buy some fish, or whatever, and the flesh is all kind of wrapped up in plastic. We don't think of what the animal went through. We don't think what the workers go through. But somebody has to stab animals all day. Somebody has to shock animals all day. Somebody has to poke them, kick them, yell at them, whack them, rape them, mutilate them. That's what animal agriculture is. It's violence. Animals do not want to cooperate. They try to escape. You just got to just be brutal. There's every single undercover video that's ever been taken by these organizations that do that. They've never once gone into a place, whether it's a big place, a middle-sized place, or a backyard place. They've never once gone into a place and not found graphic violence towards animals. Always graphic violence, always hideous violence towards animals, always. It brings out the worst in people. So the workers basically doing the work that nobody else wants to do. And so they have the highest rates of work-related injuries. They have the highest rates of suicide, drug addiction, alcoholism, spousal abuse, child abuse. They go back, unfortunately, into their communities and families and neighborhoods and do terrible things to other people. Because they have what is referred to by psychologists as perpetrator-induced traumatic stress disorder. You know, if you just stab animals all day, you're going to go stab somebody else. You kick them, or they just drug themselves or drink themselves, and then they do it. And so we have these webs of trauma. They traumatize people. The people are traumatized. They traumatize other people. How can we have a healthy society of joy and freedom and love and care? It's possible. It's totally available to us. But not if we want to eat meat and dairy and traumatize animals and make people traumatized and harm and destroy animals and terrorize them. So we have to understand that what Martin Luther King said is right. He said, violence anywhere hurts everyone everywhere. We're all interconnected. And what veganism is saying, the same thing, except we say it the other way. We say kindness and compassion anywhere blesses everyone everywhere because we're all interconnected. See, this is the beauty of the message. What we're understanding is we have a choice what kind of a world we're going to live in. Are we worthy to live on this earth? Are we worthy? Have you noticed, how many of you have noticed that the earth is abundant, really abundant, and beautiful? Really beautiful. Anybody knows that? Yeah, some of you. We've not. I mean, it's shockingly beautiful and just abundant as totally abundant. We're still at a very primitive level in our evolution and our spirituality and our technology and everything else. And but even at a primitive level, I think we can see that we can easily feed everyone on a fraction of the land. That we live in webs of nature, of flowers and trees and birds and animals that are celebrating life. Everywhere, if we have an eye that can see it, animals are celebrating, and life is celebrating. Life on this earth is a celebration, essentially, until people come along, and start imprisoning and killing and terrorizing. But we have to realize that we're here to celebrate also, that we can celebrate our lives, that we can actually live our lives as celebrations of creativity and love and abundance, and to question the outer violence of our food, and then also question the inner violence. So those are the two, the environmental and the cultural. The third one is just basically the physical level. Actually, in the World Peace Diet, there's a chapter called The Intelligence of Human Physiology, which is actually the longest chapter in the book, and it goes into essentially this question. If you look at our physiology, just look at our physical bodies, what are we designed to eat? You look at our dentition, the kind of teeth we have, how hard they are, how they're shaped. Look at our jaw structure. We have a jaw that has a hinge like that, goes side to side. What kind of saliva we have. We have a saliva that only does one thing, it breaks down carbohydrates. What kind of pH we have in our system, our stomach, it's very weak, it doesn't break down flesh. How long it is, what kind of circulatory system. Anyway, look at everything very carefully. It's obvious. We are not designed to eat animals, or animals like, we're certainly not designed to eat the cow's milk. We don't have what renin, which is the enzyme that cows have to break down the main protein in milk, which is casein. So, you know, so dairy is clearly the driving force behind the huge profits of the medical industry. All the things that little kids have, all their, you know, tonsillitis and appendicitis and runny nose and sore throats and acne and colic and then type 1, type 2 diabetes, and you can go on and on forever and ever and ever. Prostate cancer, all dairy. You know, we're not designed, we're not cows, we're not cows. So anyway, and meat also. But we can eat it, we can do it, we can eat meat, we can eat dairy. And our bodies are these just celebratory potential. Whatever you put into your mouth, your body's going to go, all right, well, I hope you don't do that again, but I'll do the best I can with it. And they just do the best they can with it, you know, but God, why do you keep doing it? So because we're here to fulfill, we're here to bless the world, we're here to fulfill the unique gifts that we have to give the world. So our body is like, yeah, our body's on board with that. Our body says, yeah, I want to help you, I want to serve you, you know, I want to be a vehicle for you, to play the piano, or to run 1,000 miles, or to teach some people, or to paint a painting, or whatever you want to do with your life, to celebrate, your body's going to help you. It wants to help you do that. And yet, you know, so we're eating all this stuff, and our body will just do the best it can with it. But, you know, look at cows. I mean, cows are eating more meat than we are. Do you think cows are designed to eat meat? What do you think?
No.
But if they kept doing it long enough, you interviewed them, and say, oh yeah, we're designed, you know, my daddy did it, my granddaddy did it, we all do it, that's what we do. So you got to realize, okay, look, there's only one reason cows are eating meat. They're not eating it because they want to. They're doing it because it is in the interest of their exploiters that they eat meat. That's why they're eating it. You know, it's not in their interest at all. It's hard on them, it causes them to be sick, but it's in the interest of their exploiters that they eat meat. It's the same for human beings in our society. There's only one reason anybody's eating meat. It's because it's in the interest of our exploiters that we eat meat. It's not in our, no one does it out of their own choice. You're doing it, if you're eating meat, dairy, you're definitely being exploited. And you're going to pay, you know, you're going to pay the price, you're going to pay the money to the medical, I call it the military-industrial meat medical pharmaceutical media complex. And this vast complex is here, and that's what it does. It basically is running, and it's running on all this. Madeline and I haven't been to doctors in 40 years. You know, we haven't been to a drugstore in 40 years. They're not getting any money off of us. So you got to understand, you know, I mean, vegans have essentially much lower rates of all of these diseases, everything. Madeline and I, just as one example, we were not too long ago in Arizona, and we went to the Grand Canyon. How many of you have been to the Grand Canyon? A few of you? Yeah, a few of you. All right, yeah, some. Anyway, if you haven't been there, it's a big canyon in Arizona. And you can stand on the edge and go, wow, that is a big canyon. And at the very bottom of the canyon is the Colorado River that made the canyon over millions of years. And we were there, we were on the south rim in our RV, we had a few days, and I remember we were walking around enjoying the beautiful views and vistas, and I noticed that everywhere you look, there are these signs that say, warning, never attempt to hike all the way down to the Colorado River and back up in one day. That is too dangerous. People die trying to do it. It's not a day trip. Don't do it. That's what these signs are everywhere they're saying. They have these pictures of these Olympic people that died trying to do it. So I said to Mel, okay, I want to try that. So I left the next morning, and I started down, and I just ran. And I get down there, and all the way down. It's very far, and finally get down to the Colorado River. And then, of course, there was a sign down there. It was hot when you get down to the bottom, and it says, no swimming, you know, in the Colorado River. And so I took a quick swim, came back up, and I was actually back up on the south rim again before noon for lunch. And I said to Madeline, you know, these signs are made, they're not made for vegans. You know, they're made for pre-vegans. They're not made. It's nothing to be proud of. It's just the basic fact is if we are living, if we're eating what we're supposed to be eating, we're not going to have arteries and tissues that are all clogged up with saturated fat, cholesterol, and acidifying animal protein. So we're just trying to, get through the day. We're going to have energy. We're going to be vital, happy people. So this is, we have to understand, we need to trust our intuition. We need to learn to connect with our inner wisdom and live our own, and learn from our own inner wisdom what we should be doing, and not listen to these outer voices that are always telling us something. To really question the official stories, question the official protein story, the official calcium story, the official human superiority story, all these stories, and really find out, make an effort to understand the food system and the ramifications of this. So what I've talked about so far is the outer. So animal agriculture is the most devastating by far on every level, to our society, to our earth, to our health. But I want to look now, turn for a few minutes to the inner level of this, because this is also really, this is even more powerful actually. The basic idea, and it's very, and more positive. I mean, you have to understand this is all a very positive message, because we, even though it's devastating, even though everything you say, this doesn't sound very positive to me. I'm not sitting here feeling very positive. But the idea is, animal agriculture is devastating. I'm not going to say that it's not. But what's positive is that we don't have to do it anymore. And we can do something else. And we can completely change the way we're living. And this is the only way to do it. It's the only way to change the way we're living. There's no other way. We cannot change the way, we can't keep eating meat and dairy and have peace and freedom and clarity and spiritual awareness and harmony. You know, so understand this. Eating animal foods in a society like we're in, and basically that is a society that's basically at its core oriented around people eating meat, dairy products, and people taking out their wallets and voting for it, just keeping the thing going. Everyone who's born here is injected with a program. And it's injected into us from the time we're infants by, as I said, every institution, by our families, and by our education and religion and so forth. And the mentality that's injected into us has, I would say, 4 or 5 main dimensions and main characteristics. Number one, probably the most basic, is it's a mentality of reductionism and the commodification of beings. It's learning to look with eyes that when we see certain beings, we know they're not beings. We know they are things. You're just, a cow is a sack of cement. You don't care about that. You just buy them, sell them, rape them, kill them, cut them up, eat them like they're, they even say, I love that, we harvest our cows. They're just tomatoes or something. Wow. So we have to understand that is not good for us. Cultivating and to realize every single meal is injected into us 3 times a day. Now, it's not just taught to us like on a blackboard when we say, you know, we are now going to teach commodification of life. No, this is ritually injected far below any kind of ability we have to defend ourselves against it. It's just injected by every institution from the time we're infants. We get, as soon as we lose our mother's breast, most people don't even get that anymore, they get cow's milk. And then we start getting the animal flesh. So we're taught at the most primordial level, way below conscious awareness, that beings are not beings, beings are things. And when we do that, we create a society like we have today, based on competition, based on manipulation of people and environments. We learn to look at forests and in terms of board feet of lumber. You know, we learn to look at other people as human resources that we can somehow use for our advantage. We learn to look at ourselves merely as a commodity. I have to sell myself on the competitive economic market. You know, I have to make a good image that I can show to all my potential employers and write a good resume so I can try to sell myself. You know, we turn everything, everybody gets turned into a commodity. We turn animals into commodities, we turn everything into a commodity, we disconnect from ourselves, we disconnect from each other, we lose the sense of sacredness, we lose the sense of the preciousness of life, we learn the ability to really look deeply and see what we're doing. Because of animal agriculture, it shuts that down. It shuts down that fundamental connection. So it's a commodification of life. It's also essentially, every meal is, number 2, injecting into us a mentality of privilege and elitism. The subtext of every meal essentially is, certain beings are inherently superior. Other beings are inherently inferior. And it's totally fine for the inherently superior beings to abuse, dominate, and exploit the inherently inferior beings however they want. Because they are inherently superior. And they are entitled. And might makes right. Because they have the power, and they don't have the power. They can't do a class action lawsuit. They can't come back and attack us. These animals just take it. You do whatever you want to them. You can rape them, kill them, steal them, everything from them. They just suffer. What we don't realize is that even though the animals do not retaliate, our violence towards them always retaliates. It always comes back. But we are so clouded as a culture, we don't see it. We wonder, why do I have diabetes? You know, why do we have war? Why do we have terrorism? Why do we have environmental pollution? Why does it look like we're not going to be on this planet more than another 20 or 30 years before we're extinct? I mean, that's where it's going to. And it's very obvious. But the thing is, we have to realize that as we sow, so shall we reap. How many of you at some point in your life have had like a companion animal of some kind, like a dog or a cat or a horse or something. Yeah, quite a few. So you know, in interacting with that being, that is a being, right? It's not a thing. She or he is a being. And they have feelings. They have interests. They have a psychological complexity. They have yearnings. You know, they do not want you to step on their tail. They go, "Ow, get off my tail!" You know, they don't want to be starved. They don't want to be stuck in a closet and for the rest of their life, you know, sitting in their own feces. So we can do that, but you know, if we do that to dogs and cats, we're thrown in jail. If we do that to cows and chickens, you know, we're saying, "Oh, he's organic and free range. Wow, fantastic! What a great guy!" I mean, can you believe it? So anyway, this is the situation. We learn to shut down our natural wisdom and compassion and intelligence in the face of all of this. And also it's a mentality of disconnectedness. This is very important to understand. Every single meal is a ritual reminder to never look deeply. Never look beyond the surface. Don't make the connection between what's on your plate and what it took to get it onto your plate. No, don't do that. Don't do it. Just stay shallow. Just stay on the surface. And when you have a whole population that is afraid to look deeply, who's only going to stay on the surface, because as soon as they look deeply into their food, can you imagine on Sunday morning or whatever, here in Tallahassee, people are sitting around the breakfast table, they're eating their French toast and their bacon, and someone's eating a piece of bacon and they say, "Wow, this bacon's good. I wonder what she was like." What? Who was like? Who are you talking about? You have a date last night? Oh no, I'm talking about the bacon. I wonder what she was like. There's no she there. That's bacon. You crazy? Get out of here. No, we're not supposed to think of we're not supposed to think, well, what kind of a life did she have, and what were her feelings, and we just stay shallow. We're injected with the mentality of staying shallow, of not looking deeply. And so when you have a whole population of people who are essentially injected with this program from the time they're born, then you have a population of people who the wealthy elite knows will reliably be obedient consumers, will reliably never question the official stories that come about 9/11 or come about the latest war with Russia or whatever it is. We just believe it all. We'll go off to war, we'll fight, we'll kill those people. We just believe whatever they say because we know we cannot look deeply. We have to believe whatever we say, whatever they say, whatever mommy and daddy tell me, because we're infantilized. We're still drinking milk in our adulthood, right? We don't want to leave our mother's breast. We just want to stay hooked up and just not think and be shallow. So what veganism is essentially is saying, wait a minute, I do not want to live that way. I want to look deeply. I want to understand. I want to know. I want to cultivate kindness, compassion, and respect, and health, and caring, and inclusiveness. Animal agriculture is about one thing. It's about exclusion. You just exclude beings from the sphere of your kindness and compassion. What veganism is the opposite. In all these cases, it's cultivating connectedness, a basic sense of radical inclusion. I'm going to include all living beings within the sphere of my kindness and concern. What a great way to live. I'm going to include all living beings, all future generations within my moral concern. That's our natural wisdom. We naturally want to live that way. We naturally feel when we see another being, if we're open at all, we see a being, then we don't want to harm them. We have a sense of, oh, you're another being, you're here on the planet with me. We're only here for a few years. What are we doing with our time while we're here? We're only here a few years. This was going on when we got here. Time goes by very quickly. It's gone. I mean, believe me, I really am aware of that. I mean, it was like just yesterday, I was taking a class in Oakland in Chinese. And the teacher was great, this woman. She was saying, if you ever go to China, remember, they will not believe a word you have to say unless you're 60 years old. Because in China, they really honor the elders. And they think if you're under 60 years old, you don't have enough experience to know anything. They don't trust you because you're not 60 yet. So, last year, it was really great. I went to China, and I stood in front of like 2,000 people. And I said, now you have to listen to me, because I am 60 years old. Well, I know what I'm talking about. And they said, well, you don't look like you're 60. I said, well, I'm a vegan. But, anyway, I'm 60. So, but the idea is that time, it goes fast. I mean, already 60 years went by. I don't know where it went. So, really, we only have to not fritter away this precious human life by just being a robot, just going along and doing what you're told with the blinders on, stabbing, paying people to stab and kill and torture animals and destroy the earth. Instead of being part of the problem, you can be part of the solution. And it means questioning the indoctrination that's been injected into us. And the other aspect, besides the ones I've mentioned, which I think is very important to mention, is it's also, animal agriculture is essentially about the domination of the sacred feminine. And we have to understand that. You know, in the World Peace Diet, I referred to this, and I have a chapter in here. It's called The Domination of the Feminine. And I refer to this, the sacred feminine within all of us, both men and women, as Sophia. Sophia was the ancient Greek goddess of wisdom. And it's interesting, I taught, as Jay was saying, I taught college courses for quite a few years in comparative religion, and pretty much all the world religions, when they talk about the wisdom deity, it's usually a goddess. Because we understand intuitively that the feminine dimension of consciousness, whether we are a man or a woman, is the feminine dimension of consciousness that is receptive and open to a higher level understanding. And so Sophia within us is the feminine, is the sacred feminine, and women I think have it in a way a little stronger than men, because women naturally have a sense of caring and kindness because they give birth and they want to care for the babies, they want to care for the environment, they want to care for the neighborhood and the community and the family and protect and nurture, and so there's a sense of caring. That's the sacred feminine. Men have it also, this natural wisdom of kindness and caring and so forth. And this spiritual connectedness we have with these positive qualities is the sacred feminine. You have to realize, animal agriculture, we think of animal agriculture as, well, basically what it is, it's human beings dominating and exploiting animals, right? Isn't that what it is? No. That's part of it. What it really is, it's men dominating and exploiting female animals. That's what it really is. You cannot have animal agriculture without the complete, horrific, hideous, violent domination of female animals, not just animals, but their reproductive organs, their reproductive cycles, their vaginas and mammary glands. I mean, it's basically, animal agriculture from the very beginning has been about men impregnating animals against their will, and as soon as they give birth to that baby, they steal it. And then they steal the milk, and then they impregnate them again, and they steal it, and they steal the eggs, and then they kill them. And so it's a rape and kill operation of sexual violence. Because sexual violence is the absolute foundation of animal agriculture. The forced impregnation of all these animals. All animals, whatever they're, turkeys, chickens, cows, pigs, I mean, they're all impregnated. Fish, they're all impregnated against their will. And the natural yearn, you can imagine if you're a woman, you give birth to a baby like a cow. After 9 months, she gives birth to a little calf. She wants nothing more than to just lick the calf, love the calf, nurse the calf. The calf wants nothing more than to just be licked and loved and nursed. And yet on any dairy, organic or not, on any dairy, a big one or a little tiny backyard one, on any of it, it's never, she thinks that's her calf. It's never her calf. It's always, no, I'm the owner, that's my calf, and they always take the calf right away and kill the calf. And then they impregnate her again and take the next one and kill them. Because you got to keep these animals. I was talking to this woman. She has a PhD. She's in her 60s, whatever. We were talking about this, and very smart woman in Southern California. I said, you know, I learned a little bit about dairy. She said, wait a minute. Are you telling me that cows don't just give milk? And I said, no, they don't just give milk. You have to impregnate them. They have to become a baby. Then they give milk for their baby. They're like us. God, I thought they just gave milk. And then I realized I'm missing that point. You know, people think that cows just give milk. That's why they're here. God gave us cows to give us milk, right? Silly me, you know. So, anyway, that's just a little footnote. But the basic idea is that the sexual violence, and then you got to, of course, you got to, you know, when you impregnate these animals, you got to have a sperm gun. You know, where do you get the sperm? Oh, you got your bull. You got to, you know, masturbate the bull and get the sperm, and then you put it in there. You know, so. And then that's just the beginning of the sexual violence. I mean, it's everywhere. It pervades the industry. So, but the thing we have to understand is, again, that the sexual violence towards these female animals causes them enormous suffering, and the babies. But they can't. All they do is suffer. They're bellowing. Mel and I have been to these places. You hear them bellowing for days, calling for their babies. And but what we have to understand is, even though it damages these cows terribly, emotionally, it also damages us. Can you imagine being raised in a society that's raping, sexually violating millions of animals every single day? That's the kind of society we're born into. And what does it do to us? It shuts down the sacred feminine. And when you have a society where the sacred feminine is shut down, then again, you have a society where people will just reliably allow you to do what I've been talking about. Destroy your rainforests, destroy our oceans, allow corporations to come invading into our lives with all their advertising, all their propaganda, and targeting our children to make them customers, using pornography and violence to manipulate them to buying products for the rest of their lives, like McDonald's does, saying burgers come from a burger patch, like they're just little things, you just pull them off like they're little berries or something. You know, just completely violating and dominating and exploiting children. Sophia would say, forget it. She would stand up and say, no, you can't do this. I care about my life, I care about my children, I care about animals, I care about wildlife, I care about hungry people, I care about the future. No, it would never be possible. So what veganism is, essentially, it's the resurrection of the sacred feminine within our society and within individuals. The sacred feminine is standing up and saying, I love my life, I love my children, I love this beautiful earth, I'm going to protect this, and I'm going to protect future generations and sanity here, and I'm not going to pay someone to stab and kill animals completely unnecessarily, when that violence always comes back in all kinds of ways. And so this is basically the situation we find ourselves in, that all of us have inherited this. We've been born into a society where this was already going on. We've been all wounded by this. Even if you're a vegan, I've been a vegan, like I said, in all these 3.5 decades. I'm still healing the wounds of being born in this society. The essential competitiveness, the essential objectifying things rather than beings. So veganism is an ongoing path of awakening, of spiritual, emotional, intellectual awakening. Some people think, well, if you go vegan, that's it, you're done. No, that's just the beginning, actually. But it's a wonderful beginning. It's like the beginning of a new chapter in your life. So there's a lot more northeast side I would love to go into. I'm kind of thinking, all right, at this point, let's see, okay, so I'll maybe take another 5 minutes and say a few more main ideas, and then what I like to do is do a short slide presentation. I actually don't usually do this, so this is an unusual presentation. We have a piano, we have a nice PowerPoint. Well, a lot of times I don't have that. And so this is going to be a slideshow of animals celebrating a life, and play some music with it. And then we'll have some time for Q&A, and then we can, and then we'll see after that. I'm not sure what's going to happen, but I'm sure it'll be good, whatever it is. So the last couple of things I want to say, one thing is basically the idea of the power of community. When we leave here, again, or just think about ourselves, the only reason anyone eats meat, dairy products, and eggs is because of the communities that we're born into, right, and that we live in. We're products of our communities, of our families, our communities. So I remember when I was a little kid, I was about 7 years old. I was born and raised in Concord, Massachusetts. Being a Unitarian, so great. I was born in Emerson Hospital. I learned to swim in Walden Pond. I went to Thoreau School and Alcott School. Transcendentalists everywhere. And but we ate a lot of meat, dairy products, and eggs. And I was about, as I said, 7 years old. I said to my mother, "So, Mom, the kind of food we're eating, is this what everybody eats?" My mother said, "Yeah, everybody eats basically what we're eating." And I said, okay, thanks. And then she came back a few minutes later and said, well, actually, that's not completely true. There are vegetarians. I still remember that, even though it was like 60, almost 64, whatever, it was 55 years ago. But, and then she said it in this way, like vegetarians, like what the heck? And then she said, like, well, these people live on, the implication was they live far away. Galaxies away. And she even said, actually, she said, you'll never meet one. I've never met one. I'm a lot older than you, so I'm sure you'll never meet one either. And they're hypothetical people. They don't really exist. Where do they get their protein? For God's sake. And my mother was totally right. That was it. I never heard the word again. I never heard that. There was not one chink in the armor of my upbringing where any light came in. I didn't have any vegan uncle or like my little nephews had or something. So that was it. And I remember going, I was about 13 years old. I went away to this summer camp in Vermont that was affiliated with this beautiful organic dairy nestled in the Green Mountains of Vermont where nothing bad could ever happen. But I remember being taught to catch chicken. I caught my chicken. I learned how to put her down on this board. I had my axe. I just cut her head off, put her through the scalding tank after she bled out, and then we ate the chicken. And I had no problem with it. I had gone through, at that point, 13 years of the most intense indoctrination a person can go through, really. 3 times a day, every meal, I knew beyond the shadow of a doubt by that time that God put these animals here for us to eat. They do not have a soul. They are very different from us. They taste good, and if you don't eat them, you will definitely die within 24 hours of a protein deficiency. So you better eat them, or all hell will break loose. If Jesus wants you to do it, so do it. You know, that kind of thing. So this was really injected into me, and even like a week or two later, we went down again. There was a dairy cow, you know, and like you said, she was just really still a heifer. They were only 3, 4, maybe 5 years old, and they've been pregnant and lactating 3, 4, or 5 cycles, and they're worn out. So we put a gun to her head, like this, and we did it. And we pulled the trigger. It took the third time. She finally crashed to the floor of the barn, and blood shooting because he cut this artery. And he said very calmly, very matter-of-factly, you've got to cut that artery right away, otherwise the meat will be soggy, and no one will ever want to eat it. And I realized, you know, all the research I've been doing ever since then, you know, for the last 40 years, that's why animals suffer so much. Is you can't just kill an animal somehow. You got to come back. You got to somehow. Their heart has to be beating, so their heart will actively beat pump the blood out of the tissues. So that's why animals suffer so much on slaughterhouses. You can't just kill them and then come back and cut them up. You have to hang upside down, and you have to die by bleeding out, which is probably the most horrific, terrible way to die that you can imagine. But that's what we do because we don't want soggy meat, you know. So anyway, I saw all that, but I never really questioned it. I didn't have any way to question it. I still thought, okay, so I went away to college. I remember in Maine, my mother was right. I heard there were some vegetarians on campus, but I never met one. And then I left home right after I graduated from college with my brother. We thought we'd go on a spiritual pilgrimage. This was in 1975. We'd try to get to California and attain cosmic consciousness, right? So we got as far as Buffalo. Actually, it was October in Buffalo. It was getting freezing, so we walked south. We actually walked about 20 miles a day for quite a few months down through with no money. It was a great adventure. But anyway, meditating and walking, and we walked from down through upstate New York into Pennsylvania, across Pennsylvania to West Virginia, into the Bible Belt, which was got through the Bible Belt into West Virginia, Kentucky, into Tennessee, and I have all kinds of stories. But anyway, when we got into Tennessee, we ended up in 1975, the end of 1975, at the farm. And the farm in 1975 was the largest hippie commune in the world. There was almost 1,000 people there, and they were eating what they call the vegetarian diet. We would actually call it a vegan diet. No one heard of the word vegan in 1975, but it was basically, there was no meat, dairy, or eggs. And I saw 1,000 people, probably 200 were children, vegan from birth, and they were thriving. They were not dying of a protein deficiency, they were not dying of a calcium deficiency, and they were doing great. And so that was like, this was the living evidence, you know. And I was eating with them every day. We had breakfast, lunch, and dinner together. We were eating. It was very primitive back then. We would cook soybeans and eat them. We would squeeze the soybeans. We'd make soy milk. We'd fool around with that and make the very first soy ice cream. It was terrible. We thought, well, that's pretty good. I mean, really primitive. But anyway, so this is what it was, you know, back then in 1975. But I remember I asked the guy, so why are you guys vegetarians? And he said, well, there's two main reasons. One is, you know, all this starvation in the world is because we're feeding most of the food to animals while people starve. We want to try to create a world of peace and abundance and harmony. And I said, well, that's great. He said, eat low on the food chain and everybody else can eat too. And then he said, the other reason is to know what the animals go through. And I said, oh, don't tell me, I don't want to hear it. And he said, well, basically, he just said like one sentence. He said, the animals that people are eating are confined in these stinking sheds, and they're mutilated. They have their noses bashed, and their ears notched, and their tails clipped, and their teeth clipped, and they're castrated by anesthesia, and all, you know, raped against their will and killed. And it was like Toto pulling the curtain back. Like I looked in this lens, and I suddenly saw this huge hell realm that we forced millions of animals to live in, and the thought of eating that suddenly became so repulsive to me, or not just eating, even just to support it. And at the same time, though, the beautiful thing about it was I had a living example of people who were not doing that, right? So it was easy, actually. So from that moment, from that day, when he told me that, I have never eaten animal flesh, you know, since that day, in 1975. And I found out many years later when I talked to Madeline, I met her in Switzerland, and we were comparing notes, and we said, oh, that's interesting. We both, you know, at that point never ate meat again in our lives from 1975. Then about 5 years later, I got out to California, San Francisco. I learned about the suffering to dairy cows and hens for milk and eggs. So I became a vegan in 1980. And then a few years later, in 1984, I decided to shave my head and become a Zen monk. So I lived in Korea, and I was in a Zen monastery in Sangwangsa, in South Korea. And it was essentially a meditation intensive I was there, and it was essentially getting up at 2:45 every morning. We started meditating from 3 in the morning till 9 o'clock at night, sitting on the floor, traditional, full lotus, just meditating and for the whole day, basically, and in silence. So, but I realized when I was there that this was a community of monks, essentially, who had been living what we would call a vegan lifestyle for 750 years. Right? It was since the 1200s. It was no meat, no dairy, no eggs, no wool, no silk, no leather. Even mosquitoes, you wouldn't just kill them. It was like, you can't do that. You got to put them outside. And so there was this sense of if we're working on ourselves and trying to evolve our consciousness and become more peaceful and become more aware, then we become more sensitive. We become more sensitive to the violence that we're causing. And we realize that if we harm others, we're harming ourselves. So I realized what veganism is actually is a modern articulation of an ancient spiritual teaching that is at the core of all the great world religions and at the core of great sages and saints and mystics and seers and benevolent people, which is ahimsa, which means nonviolence, which essentially means that if you harm another, you always harm yourself more than you ever harm them. As soon as we start harming other people for our own benefit, we not only harm them, but it boomerangs back. That saying, as you sow, so shall you reap. Or like Jesus, the basic golden rule, don't do to others what you don't want to have them do to you. When we do that to others who are sentient, like animals are, we not only harm them, but we create a consciousness of fear and of competition and of danger. And so anyway, when I came back to this culture, I remember I felt like I had an opportunity to just quiet my mind for many months, and I realized that I had been injected for at that point about maybe 28 years of programming, and that I was just full of all this programming. And so just to do the inner work of purification, to realize that what I am, what we all are essentially, is consciousness. It's eternal consciousness. We're conscious beings. And that our inherent nature is the nature of joy and freedom and wisdom and kindness and creativity. But we're born into a society where we're taught to just be a whole different way. And so when I came back here, I remember feeling I had these roots of veganism that were very deep inside of me. And I remember talking to Madeline and at one point and saying, basically there's lots of books that talk about the fact that eating animal foods is bad for your health, it's bad for the environment, and it's bad for animals. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more to it. And so I began to see that when you look at the history of this, the anthropology, the sociology, the psychology, the whole thing, which the Berkeley side, I haven't even had a chance to go into all of that, but a lot of it. But anyway, you realize that actually it's way bigger than this. It's understanding the ramifications of our food choices on this bigger picture, the history of it. I mean, it's so fascinating. I haven't got it. There's one chapter looking at that, but I won't be able to. But anyway, so I remember saying, I can't wait to read a book that'll just give that whole big picture. It's so great to read that. I can't wait. And so a couple of years went by, nobody wrote the book, and then Madeline said, well, I think if you want to read that book, you'll probably have to write it yourself. I didn't want to hear, how am I going to write such a book? I can't do it. She said, just do some writing, just write. And so I started just writing every day, writing. And eventually it kind of just started coming through. It was almost like just a download. And it's published, and like I said, it's now going worldwide. And in fact, even when the guy who invented the word vegan, Donald Watson, in 1944, he was a vegetarian, but he wanted a word that would account for motivation, because the word vegetarian does not account for motivation. You can be a vegetarian for any reason. But he said vegan does it for kindness. He said veganism is a philosophy and way of life which seeks to exclude, as far as possible and practical, all forms of exploitation of and cruelty to animals for food, clothing, or any other purpose. And so anyway, that began the vegan society and the whole vegan. It's really, like I said, a modern iteration of ahimsa or kindness. And anyway, when the Worldly Side first came out, he was 95 years old, living in England. There was a journalist who was going over there and interviewing him. He interviewed him twice. He was very healthy. He was walking through the hills of England, still at 95. Then he went over a third time, and he called me. And he said, well, I just want you to know, I'm with Donald Watson. It's the third time I'm interviewing him. And he's a fascinating guy, but now he's actually not walking anymore. He's now in a bed. And he's talking to people, but he said he's had a great life. It's time for him to leave the planet now. But I wanted you to know that what he does every single afternoon is he sits in his bed and he just has his son-in-law read him the World Peace Diet. And he's telling people that this is the book that gives the message he was trying to give when he invented the word vegan. And so for me, the book had really definitely just come out. And I have a sense it's not my book. It's like I agreed to write something that would create the foundation of a culture where peace and freedom and justice and equality and sustainability are actually possible. And they are possible. They're absolute, I think in a sense that they're inevitable. But we're called now to make the change, to have the next, we've had the herding revolution where we started owning animals as property, which gave rise to a wealthy elite. War, as I mentioned, slavery, the domination of women, the exploitation of animals and wildlife, and a warrior society where boys are emulating the role model of a hard, tough, disconnected male. So what veganism is essentially is the next evolution, and we have to do it. If we don't do it, we're not going to survive for sure. And, so this is the situation we're facing, and it's up to each one of us as individuals to decide how we are going to respond to the situation, to the challenge. Really, it's a challenge. But every challenge, I think, has a gift to give to us, and the gift is enormous. I've met so many people when you go vegan, it's like, people are afraid to speak in public, because I'm with the eye and so on. But then they go vegan and say, well, I've got to speak up, So they become very good at public speaking. And they can draw out, you can do anything. You can do anything. So I'm going to close now with, like I said, that slideshow. So is that okay with everybody?
Yes.
And then we'll have a short Q&A. So basically, this is just a short. It's only like 5 minutes long. I'm going to play a little music. And we're going to just show some signs of the animal celebrating their lives. We haven't been talking about animals, but it's very abstract. So I'm going to play a little piece of original music. Madeline and I call this the mouse piece because it's a piece where it was inspired by a little mouse that was visiting our house. And maybe we can turn the lights down a little bit for just this part. Yeah. How do we do that? I'm good. Yeah. Okay, and then I'm going to see if this works here. Oh, good, it works. Okay, so here we go. Can you turn that off, maybe? This, I mean, is it possible? Thank you all so much for joining us. And I'd like to now open up and take a few questions. But before I do, I think Madeline has something. She's sneaking to the front here. Let's get a hand for Madeline. There's really only two things I've done right in my life. One was marrying Madeline, the other was going vegan. So you can't marry Madeline, but you can go vegan. And she's the artist here, and yeah, go ahead.
I have a donation box here. We don't have a set fee for the talk Will gives usually. So we would really appreciate some traveling donation for fuel and just, you know, being on the tour. So I will pass this around, and we appreciate every donation.
Whatever, just whatever you think.
Yeah.
So does anyone have a question they would like to ask I can respond to? I'll try to take a few of those, and then we'll go forth somehow. Okay, yes, ma'am, yes.
I'm wondering how much of this problem would you consider to be, sorry.
I got it. How much of this problem?
Would you consider to be, like, solely the fault of the United States versus how much do you think is, like, the Western world in general? Or do you think it's really a global problem?
Right.
Obviously it affects everyone, but are we the ones causing it?
Right. That's a great question. You know, in this evening's program, I didn't really have a chance to go into the history like I try to usually do, but basically, the United States is just, you know, the United States does happen to be the country, we have the distinction basically of being the country in the world that has the highest per capita consumption of animal foods, and we eat really the most. We also have the highest rate of prison incarceration, the highest rate of pollution and so forth. But I think that it's a global problem, and as I say, you know, if you look back at the history of this, it came out of actually Iraq 10,000 years ago, and it was people just owning animals as property, called herding. And it spread essentially from the Eastern Mediterranean to the Northern Mediterranean to Central Asia to Europe, came over here. It's basically the European, but it's still spreading throughout the world through Conagra, Cargill, Monsanto, Kentucky Fried Chicken, Burger King, and also French, and lots of different companies. But the whole thing I call the military, industrial, meat, medical, pharmaceutical complex. So it's not merely the United States, but I would say that as Americans, as people living in the United States, we have a tremendous, we have a lot of leverage. If we in the United States actually go vegan more, I mean, right now the countries in the world that are the most proactive going toward vegan, it seems like, are Taiwan, Israel, Germany, All three of those are really moving, and the United States is actually pretty good. I think we're still a culture that's emulated a lot by the rest of the world, and so I think as we as Americans, and when we go vegan, I think our impact is multiplied. So that's why it's very important for us as Americans, especially I think, to understand these things, to move to veganism, and also I have a whole online training actually. It's like many hours of study, which basically is designed two main things: how to thrive as vegans in a not yet vegan world. And the other is how to become more effective vegan advocates for veganism. And that's, again, a huge subject. I can talk for many, many hours, but the basic idea is to realize that it's a global phenomenon. We have people that have gone through the World Peace Diet training all over Europe, Australia, New Zealand, and South Africa, and India, and a lot in South America. There's vegan movements in every country, but I think the United States is a particularly egregious example of the devastation of animal agriculture. So that's a great question. Maybe one more? Okay, yes, ma'am.
What do we feed our cats and dogs? They're carnivores.
Okay, the short answer to that is dogs, for the most part, are not obligate carnivores. They thrive on a plant-based diet. The oldest dog in the world was a vegan dog. So I think you could, basically feed the dog. There's a lot of commercially available dog foods like V-Dog and Evolution and a bunch of other ones you can buy online, or you can make your own. There's a lot of recipes, lentils basically, and vegetables. Dogs thrive. Their coats get healthier. They live longer. They have better breath. They're happier. Dogs really are not a problem. Cats, on the other hand, are a little bit more obligate carnivores, although the founder of Evolution, who makes dog food and cat food, his name is Eric Weissman, and he's a friend of mine actually. I've just talked to him about this for years. He swears he's been researching this for over 25 years. He's had his company, and he says that 2/3 of all cats can thrive on a vegan diet for sure. Some males maybe don't get enough acidity in their diet, and they may get urinary tract blockage. But virtually all female cats and a lot of male cats will be fine, he says. So I think that's one of those situations where it's best to use your judgment. But there's quite a few veterinarians who can help you, who are vegans, who can help you. You can, like Armighty May in Los Angeles. She's the vegan vet, and she knows a lot about this. You can actually, she's very nice. You can even talk to her. You just Google that, vegan veterinarian Armighty May. And if you have a cat, you want to know more about that. But it's, we live in a society basically where, based on herding animals, and both dogs and cats were basically used by herders. Dogs to protect the animals from predators, and cats to kill vermin. So therefore we don't have companion animals like, we didn't choose rabbits and, and deer or something. We eat dogs and cats. So we think, well, my dog's a carnivore, I must be too. We kind of do that. So the whole thing is part of a whole brainwash thing. But the best thing is, I think it's good to have companion animals to rescue them, but I think in the long-term picture of evolution of humanity, we're going to have to get rid of this enslavement of animals, of all animals, like this idea that this is my dog, I own. In fact, in Defense of Animals has started a whole campaign where you never say you're the owner. And they're actually getting laws changed throughout at every level of government that you're the guardian or of an animal. You're not the owner of the animal. You can't own an animal. But because these animals, in a sense, we've taken away their sovereignty, and they're dependent on us, and so to let animals live their lives freely like they did for millions of years. That's really, I think, and then we can have a relationship with them when they're free, and then we can go to a whole other level of relationship with them. So thank you, that's a great question. We may have time for maybe one, okay.
I had a question. You were talking about the economic system built around meat eating. Do you feel like capitalism plays a big role in that?
Yeah, I go into that in the World Peace Diet. Basically, as I say, the very first, when this first started developing, we had this arising of people owning, first it was wild sheep, and then wild goats, and then wild cows as property, and they were not only for food, but that was wealth. And so the ones who accumulated a lot of cows and sheep and goats were the first capitalists. You read about them in the Old Testament. They were the kings, or the ancient Greek. I used to teach the Epic of Gilgamesh, the Iliad, the Odyssey. That's only 3,000 years ago. But if you go back, earlier than that, you can see it. By then, it's all developed. And these wealthy ones, these wealthy guys that had a lot of sheep and goats and cows, that's why they were rich. Head means that the word for head in Latin is capita, right? So These people were capitalists. They owned the wealth, which is the head of the sheep and the goats, and the means of increasing that was to breed them. You know, and the other thing, as I said, they invented the other way to increase their wealth, which was they say, the other guy, he's got a lot of sheep and goats. We're going to all attack, and we're going to take them. And so we just doubled our wealth. We doubled our lives, but then they're going to fight back, so then we have war. So the first wars were basically capitalists trying to make more money. Does that sound familiar? And it's been like that ever since. So we must understand that this is the roots of capitalism. It's violence, it's oppression of animals, of ecosystems, of women. That's it, you know, and we have to understand that, and when we move toward a plant-based diet, we're actually creating an entirely different world based on kindness and compassion and sharing and connectedness to community. I highly recommend all of us to get much more connected with our food, to grow your own food, to support community-based agriculture, to create more local economies that are healthy, to not support these large multinational corporations and all that stuff. It's all interconnected, but food is the primary way this whole thing gets injected into us. That not only the outer devastation, but the mentality that just keeps us going along with it. Okay, maybe one more. Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
Short question. I was curious if you're familiar with the concept of freeganism, and if you are, what is your take on it? Are they helping, hurting, maybe neutral in the fight?
I did that for a while, actually. Freeganism. I mean, it's, you know, freeganism. It's basically dumpster diving. In other words, you don't ever buy anything. You just go and live out of dumpsters. You know, it used to be easier in the old days because the dumpsters weren't all locked up like they are now. You know, my brother and I, when we were on the road, you know, we would go behind grocery stores and we would find bananas and eggs or whatever. I wasn't vegan at that point. So freegans are very often not vegans because they'll eat some eggs or whatever they can get. You know, they'll eat, but they never support. They try not to support the system. Economic system, and just live, because we, you know, as you know, our society wastes so much. We waste enough food to feed the entire country of Mexico, probably. You know, we just waste everything. So freegans live on the fringes, and they kind of take it. But as far as, you know, I think they're kind of neutral. I mean, I think it's good to do that, but I think we have to be more political, or at least more expressive. You know, share why we're doing it. But I definitely think it's, you know, it's definitely better than. You know, being a Bill Gates or something.
It might not be such a great thing eating the meat from the dumpster. Because
no.
Of course, there's the health problems.
Yeah.
But it might be more of an insult. It might be more of an insult to the animal to let it rot in the dumpster than to actually maybe put it to some use.
Right. Yeah.
You know,
I hate that. I mean, it's such a tragedy to see all this grain and all this suffering and everything going to a hamburger or something, and the person eats half of it and throws it away.
Yeah.
I mean, oh my God. I mean, it's one thing to even buy it, but then to throw it away.
Maybe a lesser of two evils.
What do we do? But that's a great point. Thank you. Okay, one last one.
With all the world moving towards eating more meat, including India, China, all of Asia, and of course the developed world as we know it, are we going to have more people eating meat or less? Where there seems to be a movement, of course, across the developed world.
Right. That's a great question, and we've wrestled with that a lot. I think essentially my feeling is as 2015 unfolds, there is an enormous momentum of awakening, I think, in our society, and I think that the so-called less industrialized nations of the world who want to be like us and they want to be able to have Burger King come in and eat their food. But you look at what happened in Bolivia. You know, the McDonald's went in there to try to set up, and they tried for about 10 years in Bolivia. They had McDonald's stores all over Bolivia, and they just wouldn't go. Nobody would go, and finally McDonald's just left with their tail between their legs, and nobody nobody would buy the stuff, and that was the end. So I think there is a consciousness rising throughout the world about the violence and oppression of the military-industrial, meat, medical, pharmaceutical, media complex, and I think it's very important for us as Americans to do the best we can to reduce it in this country. It's the same thing that happened with the tobacco industry in a way. What happened in the tobacco, and this is I think very important, like in the tobacco, remember 20, 30 years ago, how people just smoked a lot. People smoked, they smoked wherever they wanted. They smoked here, they smoked there, they smoked in their underwear, they just smoked wherever they wanted. And then at one point, people said, wait a minute. Because people said, well, they're just hurting themselves, So if they want to do it, it's their right to do it. And then people started to say, well, wait a minute, there's such a thing as secondhand smoke, right? It's like if I'm smoking in a room and you have to breathe it, it's hurting you, actually. You have to breathe that, and they found it's hurting people in the room as much as it's hurting the smoker, maybe even more. And then they found out about third-hand smoke, and they found out, wow, I mean, even if it's in the draperies and the upholstery and the carpets, you go into the room, nobody's smoking, but it's hurting you. So all these laws got passed, it became like, you can't smoke in public places, and people are smoking less and everything else. And so what the corporations did, they just went, like you're saying, they just said, oh, we'll just bring smoking to India, we'll bring it to China, we'll bring it everywhere else, to South America, bring it to Africa, you know. That's what they're doing, that's what the meat industry wants to do here, you know, they're trying to, you know, bring it everywhere else. And we're starting to see that happening in our society. We have just like we had secondhand, I think this is going to only start happening, there's going to be a phenomenon called secondhand eating, you know. People say, well, I can eat a steak if I want to, it's my choice. I'm a free person, I can just eat that if I want. And it's like saying I can smoke and blow smoke in your face, you know. It's not a free choice. You're harming other people, right? You're harming animals, you're harming ecosystems, you're destroying the planet for everybody. You know, we're going to put a tax on it, we're going to say you can't do it. You know, it's going to stop. You can't do it anymore. You can't eat meat. It's not a free choice. It's violent. So that is coming. And I think it's just a matter of us understanding this is a very deeply rooted system. And the more we can help that to happen in this society, it'll help it to happen in the rest of the world as well. And we just have to make it happen, and who knows how it's all going to go. But I think it's about reaching critical mass, essentially. You know, that right now, vegans are maybe 1%, maybe 2%. There is a sense through the research that the number of vegans is increasing. Some people say exponentially, some people say just gradually, but whatever it is, it's increasing. And even at only 1 or 2%, the rest of the culture knows what veganism is. You know? We're already like majorly on the radar. So I think if we can just get up to 5%, I think we can get up to 10%, we'd see major changes. I think we'd see a lot of other people just moving in that direction because the food is so delicious. It's so much, we feel so much better about ourselves. And it's just the future calling. Some people say, well, we've always done that, and I talk about that. Like do we want to be driven by the past, like we always ate meat, you know, which we didn't, but anyway, just be driven by that, or do we want to be drawn by a positive future and have a vision of a positive future for all of us and for our children, and then we can see that we let that vision pull us forward, and we can, instead of being driven by the past. So I'm going to stop here because we've gone quite a while, and those chairs don't look all that comfortable. As a vegan, I try not to cause unnecessary suffering, dissension. There you are. So what I'd like to do is close. Maybe with just one thing. I'll just share a short poem by Shel Silverstein that I think kind of sums it all up. The poem is called Point of View, and it goes like this. Thanksgiving dinners sad and thankless, Christmas dinners dark and blue, when you stop and try to see it from a turkey's point of view. Sunday dinner isn't sunny, Easter feasts are just bad luck, when you see it from the viewpoint of a chicken or a duck. Oh, how I once loved tuna, salad, steak, and lobster too, till I stopped and looked at dinner from the dinner's point of view. I think that's the basic message that Madeline and I are bringing here. The basic idea is to, like Madeline does with the paintings, to see the beauty of animals, the beauty of nature, and to stop for a moment, or for as long as it takes, to look from another perspective outside of the culturally induced blindness that really we're all forced to put on, to look deeply, to make the connections, to allow our natural intelligence and compassion and connectivity to come back, and to realize that we can transform our lives, and we can help others also to transform their lives in a very positive way, to have positive change, so that we can build a society where peace and justice and freedom are possible, and we can raise our awareness and raise our consciousness to the point where we really are worthy to live on this beautiful and abundant planet. So I hope we can stay in touch. We do have copies of the World Peace Diet in the back, which is printed on 100% post-consumer recycled paper, so no trees are cut down. And you get a free CD, and we have a special discount price on it. We also have the brand new book that just came out like a couple of weeks ago called Circles of Compassion, Connecting Issues of Justice, which I'm the editor of, which is basically about intersectionality. We have 30 vegan authors from all over the world, actually, who are leading authorities on the connection between violence towards animals and people, you know, racism, sexism, classism, heterosexism, ableism, and world hunger, all these things, environmental devastation. So it's really, that book is also available, and put out recycled paper. And we have CDs of music, Madeline's paintings, and cards, and all that kind of stuff. So I'm happy to sign copies of the World Peace Diet. Much love to you all. Thank you all so much for coming. Thanks for being the change, and go for it.